All right, we should be live now. Good morning, folks. For those that don't know, I'm Peter. I'm creator and lead designer of Tales from Elsewhere. And this video series that I've been doing a lot more lately is all about interviewing other indie designers who have a product out there that I think is cool in some way, whether that be the setting or the mechanics or just the vibe or its inspiration. And so today we are going to be talking about, I would say, a very niche subject, but one that I think is really cool. So I'd like to introduce my new friend, Ryan. So Ryan works at Grinning Portal Games. He's another like solo shop like me. I'm mostly solo, but not fully solo. Uh, and Ryan has made a adventure slash campaign structure called Serenity Springs, and this is for a D&D campaign, but uses 1950s nostalgia horror as the vibe. And there's a link down below to take a look at some of the visuals from his Kickstarter page. It's live right now. So we're going to be talking shop a bit here about horror and the 50s and anachronism. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So, Ryan, thank you so much for joining me on this soon to be 80-degree morning for me. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll hop right in?
My name's Ryan. I've been running RPGs since about 2016, 2017 or so, starting with D&D as most people do. But I've branched out into a bunch of different games. I'm a game design nerd in general, so I really like to try different systems, see what makes them tick. I've run Call of Cthulhu and Monster of the Week and Blades in the Dark, and I have like a shelf of things I want to try at some point. I'm currently running the Old Gods of Appalachia
Oh,
game, which
nice.
is a bit more niche, but yeah, it's the cipher system, and I wanted to explore that. And also, I'm a huge fan of the podcast, so um,
I feel like we could have a totally separate call, like talking about Old Gods of Appalachia and whether Cipher System was the right system for an Old Gods of Appalachia campaign. I think there's an anyway. I'm a big fan as well of Old Gods.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have no idea about that question because I've only played 2 sessions of it so far, and that's the only
gotcha.
cipher I've played. But it is interesting. I really like the concept of GM intrusions and like, hey, I'm going to give you some experience and also make your life much more difficult.
Exactly. Oh, Twin Steel saying the volume. So you're saying the whole volume for the stream is really low? Is that what you're saying there, Twin Steel? Let me see what I can do. This is where my ineptitude at streaming is pretty bad. Okay, and Lucian was saying the volume is really low. Like my outbound looks max on things. That's really interesting. I'll have to probably assess this off stream with somebody who's better at doing this sort of stuff. But it's a problem I think I've had before where my streams are all a little quiet. But with the volume up, y'all can hear us, right? Just, mention in chat. If you can hear us, you just have to turn
Test,
it up.
test,
Yeah.
talking.
As long as you can hear us, even if you have to turn it up a bit, we'll call that at least a win for today. Oh, we'll give him a sec. Um, Whole stream is really low. Interesting. Yeah, we can hear you. Ryan is louder. Oh, so I'm quiet. Interesting. If only Peter was good at tech stuff, he might be able to adjust this better. Volume is normal for me. Well, okay, I've got it kind of I'm turning up my own mic a bit here, and maybe that'll help with my volume. Well, let's proceed, and off stream I can fiddle with this. All right, so what I want to start talking about is 1950s and horror in general. So horror informs a lot of my game design and my world building, and I absolutely love it. Um, so let's talk a little bit about what horror touch points you have for Serenity Springs, and I'll bring up I'll put some art up on the screen too from your game, and we can from your page, and we can kind of talk about it here because the like kit bashed vibe of some of this art is just absolutely peak.
Yeah, yeah, we should definitely. I really need to shout out my layout person, Excalibur, who had the brilliant idea of kit bashing old artwork from now very public domain stuff, and
I love it.
uh, we've found so many insane images. I'm as one of the end goal, or as a potential stretch goal, we might put out a document that just, here's all the horrifying stuff that didn't make it in, but we found it really funny and strange from these
I
old
love that.
magazines.
I had a designer on here just like a month or so ago who also used just kit bashed art, right? Just messed with it a little bit because the budget is effectively nothing for that, right?
Yep.
You don't have to pay for it. It's all either Creative Commons or just available. And I think that was a really smart choice for what you did here. I mean, the cover, with the couple at the diner, right? With the weird cryptid creature out the window,
Yep.
just the portrait here of Dottie is nightmare fuel. This lady. So
Oh,
it's so
I
good.
I remember as soon as I found that picture, I was like, "Mwah, that's it.
That's the
That's what
one.
I need."
Yeah. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what sort of horror you like, your horror style, and maybe what influences you had here.
Yeah, so I didn't really like horror until my early 20s or so. It was around the time that a few different things came out. There's like kind of horror renaissance of like Get Out and The Witch and It Follows. And I've always been big into movies in general. And when those movies came out, I was like, oh, horror can actually be good, huh? It's like, very uh,
My
I
man.
was, yeah, yeah. I was wrong to think horror couldn't be good before that point, but it helped demonstrate. And yeah, since then I've just been really enjoying the genre, and it
Hmm.
feels like it's only gotten better over the years. I then, uh, a while after that realization, married my wife, who is an even bigger horror fan than I am, and
Awesome.
has claims to have seen basically every horror movie and falls asleep to them sometimes. So like,
So seen them. I don't know, right? I'm just kidding.
yeah, yeah,
That's
but
great.
no, she's very knowledgeable about it, and loves loves watching them with me as well. And as far as what I specifically like, I tend to gravitate much more towards the monster fiction than like the more realistic stuff or the more slashery stuff.
Mm.
Um, so like I maintain Alien as like the best monster put to screen, just because it is so frightening and thematically rich, and the all of the ideas from the way it's born to the acid blood are just genius, and there's a million cool ways to use it.
I knew
um
I'd like you, Ryan. I knew I'd like you. Yeah, that's great. I see we have a lot of shared taste. I can tell, and I agree that horror, art house horror, or this more high concept horror started to become really prevalent in the early, mid 2000s. Right, we started to see this jump. Directors like Jordan Peele,
mhm.
Robert Eggers, who you were mentioning, are some of my favorites as well. Yeah, I saw The Witch and I was like, oh yeah, more of this, please.
Yeah.
Give me this weird, moody, atmospheric,
Yep.
just detailed world. And I will see. I saw that in theaters, and I said to myself, I will see every movie this guy makes.
Yep.
That's great. Yeah, love that. And we were relevant to Serenity Springs here. We've seen a lot of historical horror as well, really tying things to a time period, really immersing you in the horror of that era as well. And I guess we haven't given necessarily a proper introduction to what is Serenity Springs. So maybe I always try to pitch other people's products
Yeah,
myself.
go for it.
So Serenity Springs is an adventure book, basically. It is not an RPG system separate. This is using like D&D 5e, but it is an adventure you could take a party on. And it is a adventure where they're pulled, or they have to go into this strange surreal realm of 1950s American suburbia that is full of oppressive homogeny, we might say. And the anachronism of that is like it's supposed to be jarring, right? And so the adventure is about this strange conspiracy going on, and there's an abductee, right? That somebody's gone missing. They're gonna have to find them. It's like a friend, a paladin, I think. And the goal is to find it while navigating the bizarre world that is this little town of Serenity Springs that they're trapped in. And it's full of, it isn't an RPG system, but you've added special mechanics bespoke for this adventure to immerse them in that field. Oh, hey,
Yep.
Ugly Goblin. Glad to have you stopping by. So that's the adventure book. And it's pretty substantive adventure, right? It'd be several sessions long to play through it. But like this, I'm showing the Freaks Beyond the Haze artwork where, the players are their fantasy characters, but they've been put into this strange realm. And that's the pitch. The best pitch I could give, I think. But it's very cool and very original in that way. And that's why we're talking about history at this time, because 1950s horror, or horror either from the 50s or about the 50s, is very cool. I always think of Heathers is kind of
Hmm.
that vibe. That's like the classic one to me. But things like the Twilight Zone also really hit those beats. Do you have any other like genre beats to mention?
Well, one other thing I want to add to your
Oh
pitch
yeah.
is real quick is it's an adventure, but it's also a big chunk of it is a whole setting document that
Hmm.
explains the setting itself and has a bunch of prompts of like, here's how you can make your own adventures, and here's how you can throw your players in with this and that kind of stuff. So it's both an adventure and a setting.
Right.
Um,
Good clarification. Yeah. You can play more than just this adventure in Serenity Springs. Yeah.
yes, yes. Um, But yeah, to go back to your question about the horror of the 1950s specifically, it's such a strange time for horror because uh, you have the what's called the Hays Code in operation
Hmm.
at that time period. And for people who don't know, the Hays Code was not a legal thing, but it was more of an industry-wide thing that um, all TV and film and everything basically had to restrict themselves to uh, very, very strict rules on what they could
So narrow.
portray.
Yeah.
Like, uh, if you ever look at old 1950s television and wonder, like, why is this married couple sleeping in two separate beds? It's the Hays Code. It's
Yeah.
like,
They practically just shake hands, the husband and wife or something, right? That's
yeah,
the amount of physical contact they're allowed.
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
even more insane than that. It's like no priest can ever be portrayed as doing something evil,
Right.
or the bad guys always have to lose, all kinds of crazy things like that.
Yep.
And so that alone, and it was a lot of that was the reason that happened was in response to a surge in interest in horror and gory things and that kind of stuff. So um, you have this strange intersection of how do we do horror in this environment where they're literally trying to prevent us from doing horror in any possible way. And I'm glad you mentioned the Twilight Zone, because to me that actually is a really beautiful example, because that show was fully in the era and fully restricted by the Hays Code. And man, some of the classic stuff they did still works today.
Yeah.
It's genuinely really cool. Like uh, one of the main things about art is that it kind of thrives under limitation. And Rod Serling just heard that and he was like, "Yeah, man, challenge
Challenge
accepted,"
accepted.
and just
Yeah.
went for it. Like the ideas and the concepts and the horror that they communicate without being able to use the traditional tools is really, really impressive. I highly recommend just pull up a list online of the 10 best episodes and watch them, because it's really, really good
They
stuff.
hold up incredibly well, and I've ranted about this before on in various places, but black and white on film, black and white film is gorgeous looking because of the use of shadow and how light
Mhm.
is manipulated and how conscientious they had to be about light. And I could rant a lot about that, and that's why like Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse is so good, is because it's on black and white film and it's able to
Yep.
capture grit and shadow. But yeah, those Twilight Zone episodes, like yeah, top 10, they hold up to this day. It's like going back and watching a lot of Hitchcock. Some of Hitchcock's films still hold up quite well with modern audiences because again, they had to work within some limitations here,
Hmm.
but they still were able to create significant tension. I remember in school, I was in a film class where we watched Rear Window, which is one of his, top films. And I'd seen that movie multiple times before, but I was in a big audience with a ton of young folks who had never seen it, and they were on the edge of their seat, that movie. Right, they were yelling at the screen like, "No, no!"
Yeah.
When the love interest, I'm blanking on all the characters' names, is walking around in the apartment, and um, he can't warn her, right? Like to that the guy came back, and just so tense. But anyway, so yeah, film in that era, television in that era was under significant restriction. We're also starting, right? We have the like McCarthyism also vibe
Mhm.
coming in within this era because of the beginnings of like the Cold War and anti-communist, anti-Russian like sentiment, and so the need to fit in, right, or to be perceived as fitting in, was incredibly powerful in this era, which is why you mechanicized that in your game. So you want to unpack a couple of those. I'm really excited to talk about like Swear Jar and the Haze and all that. So
Yeah, yeah,
let's
yeah.
start talking through how did you mechanicize some of that horror or that vibe of Hayes laws, McCarthyism, and so forth in this setting?
Yeah, so a little bit of background to the whole project. This actually started as a homebrew domain of dread from Ravenloft
Oh,
because
that's
I was,
perfect.
yeah, so originally I was running a Ravenloft campaign and I was like, I need to make up my own domain of dread. And this idea came to me for it. Um, so it has since kind of evolved past that. It's no longer a domain of dread specifically, but you can definitely see some of the inspiration there. Um,
100%.
so, so the haze uh, was inspired by the mists of Ravenloft.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the haze in Serenity Springs, spelled Hayse, a very deliberate reference to the Hays Code that I was just talking about,
Mm-hmm.
is a mysterious force that censors stuff. It just kind of floats around. It censors anything violent, anything sexual, anything that would be
Yep.
untowards in the time period. And the townsfolk kind of stay away from it because it's scary and sometimes well, I'll get to some of the other things that it can do. But
Yeah.
as far as the mechanics go, like I said, all violence is censored in Serenity Springs. And so what that means is when you attack somebody or someone attacks you, you don't know how much damage you take. You
That's
just get
so great.
stabbed. And the way I described it when I was running it was like, the G-man punches you, but as he aims his fist at you, a blob of haze just kind of emerges, and you're pushed out of it, but you've taken damage, and
Yeah, you just note it
I,
behind the DM screen or something, right?
yeah, and I have such a fond memory of the first time someone got in my table got attacked. I was like, yeah, they hit you for some damage, and I'm like, how much damage? I'm like, oh no, it'd be much too violent to tell you how much damage. And the look of horror across all of my players at that moment.
That's so good.
And because I don't want to make it fully way too difficult, I've written
Yeah,
in that you can take a bonus action to do a medicine check to figure out how much health you have,
makes sense. But
which,
but
you
now it's
know,
a gameplay choice, and it's a gameplay mechanic that the players interact with, right? It's prompting them, which I really like. I love that, by the way. Just to rant very briefly about why that's so cool. um, Something that frustrates me a lot about modern D&D like adventure design and class design is how safe it all is on being very like within the box of what they've already established. And it's why indie design is so fun, is because you'll indie designers will make something weird. Like, yes, all the violence and other content is censored here. What a horrifying domain of dread that would be, right? And I can totally picture players having that experience you're describing way more viscerally than even going to Ravenloft, right? Where it's like, yeah, there's zombies and vampires and werewolves, sure. But you go to a place where like they can't swear.
yeah,
And suddenly it's really weird to them. I love it.
yeah.
Yeah,
So to jump off what you were saying about they can't swear, that was the other
yeah.
concept you mentioned. So there is a force of nature in this universe called the swear jar. It's actually up at the top of the
Yeah,
Kickstarter
we'll go
page,
back to that picture.
and
There it is.
It's just a sentient, it's exactly what it looks like. It's a sentient little jar with angel wings, and every time someone swears, it shows up, and you have to toss it a quarter in order to satisfy it. If you do not, it zaps you, and the zap removes one permanent HP,
Oh,
which
that's
to
so
me,
good.
which to me is just annoying enough that you can't fully ignore it.
Yeah,
Um, and that was kind of the intention, is I didn't want people to just like not uh, be able to not care about it.
that's a
Y-
sting. It's a little
yeah,
sting, but that's a sting.
yep.
Absolutely.
And
That's
the other
great.
thing is that I deliberately write in, it only accepts quarters. Whatever currency you have from wherever you are, that doesn't work here. And it works in that secondary mode as well of encouraging the players to find currency,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is a
because they have
thing
their
that D&D
gold and
is.
silver coins, right?
Right,
Yeah, but they need
right,
quarters. Yeah, that's great. Oh, and I realized
yeah.
I missed a couple things in chat. Oh, Lil C, hey buddy. Lil C organizes Crit, which is a online free convention that I'm participating in this summer. There'll be more people who watch my channels hear more about this coming soon. But he's saying he loves Jazz Age Eldritch Horror, which is I sign me up for that, right? Jazz Age Eldritch Horror is so good. Um, we could also probably start talking about things like Sinners as well, which is blues, of course. But yeah, like no, what 1930s Mississippi Delta, another ripe place to
Hmm.
produce horror. Um, Absolutely. And is it kind of like Star Trek on the holodeck, still fantasy characters but stuck in this world? That's a great question, Ryan, for this. So yeah, the players, you have an elf archer, a goblin like druid, like all these characters. Are they censored in any way themselves when they come through, or are they just completely fish out of water in this? I'd love to know the setup there.
Yeah, so completely fish out of water, because to me that's part of the fun as well. Um, I really like the premise of a typical 1950s suburb that then has to deal with a bunch of D&D bullshit. Like that is,
Yeah,
to me, that's an inherently funny and interesting concept. And
yeah,
I've written in some ways of handling that. One of the things that I think is interesting is that for once in this setting, you actually know a lot more about the world than your character does, which is almost
right.
never the case in an RPG, right? Like you, as someone who exists in this world,
Yeah,
have at least a basic sense of what a suburb is, whereas your D&D character doesn't, and that's an interesting kind of dichotomy to play with. Um, the other thing is, so we haven't touched on this element, but you mentioned the conformity of the world and the horror behind that. And there were a lot of I absolutely wanted to include that in Serenity Springs, and there are a lot of ways that I could have done that. And what I settled on was a kind of hitting a very unsubtle approach, which is essentially that everything that is a human, and literally everything else, dwarves, elves, dragons, goblins, whatever, that's a commie. So you got humans and commies,
right.
and that's it.
I mean, that's so spot on, though, right? Well, and I can totally see the DNA of a domain of dread here, right? Because this is horror we're talking, right? And that the xenophobia of the
Yeah,
1950s, right? This if you do not dress the same way, look the same way, act the same way as everybody else. Huge quotes doing a lot of work here, of course.
yeah,
Whether it's in your personal, professional, artistic life, anything, right? You were at best ostracized at best.
yeah,
And so planting modern players into a 1950s suburban hell, right, is I just know like players I play with would find this absolutely horrifying, just
hmm,
so horrifying, especially with how uncanny valley Serenity Springs is also, right? Just the surrealness of it, the oppression of it is palpable. And that's
yeah,
really interesting from a horror design standpoint because you have people like me. I'm not going to get scared when the zombies are coming in a game. I'll get excited because I love this kind of stuff. Like that makes me happy.
yeah,
But like that won't necessarily have as much tension for me simply because I watch a lot of like violent horror is something that I'm fairly inured against. but the palpability of 1950s forced homogeny is visceral for a
Yeah.
lot of people, right? It's very interesting. Yeah, I absolutely see that landing uh,
Yeah.
with players. And this adventure, I'll bring up the picture of, again, the this reminds me of like Reefer Madness kind of vibe of like the people running in terror from
Yeah.
something, and it's just like because this person's smoking weed like that, and
Yeah.
then Panic in the Streets sort of artwork you found here just because some people dressed in medieval attire showed up, right?
Yeah.
And how much of a ruckus that would be.
And I again, I do want to shout out my layout person because she, well, she and I found like each person you see in that cover is
Yeah,
from a different
different,
source. It's
right?
pretty clear. So I found a bunch of them, and then she actually did the work of organizing them in the way that makes sense. And there were several different approaches to it, and it's a lot of fun there. Also, I do have to mention the adventure is called Freaks from Beyond the Haze. In case it's not clear from the cover, the players are the freaks.
Yeah, yeah. I hope that would let people would read that from it. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's this moral panic, right, that happens among the people there, right? And in the 1950s, I mean, this becomes more prevalent, more like into the late 70s and 80s. But you also have things like satanic panics, all that kind of moral scares that people that
Yeah.
happen. You'd absolutely tap into that running stuff in Serenity Springs. Absolutely. Well, and what excites me about this is I could tell that the setting. So this is the adventure. This is presented for a D&D campaign, right? Because of that anachronism of the players being pulled into it, and they're yeah, like an elf and a dwarf and a wizard and stuff. And there's something delightful about that fish out of water. But I could see myself using this in a Call of Cthulhu, or I would say not Call of Cthulhu. You'd use it in something like Delta Green, where they're modern and they get pulled back in time. Like that would
Mhm.
also be super fun
Yeah.
in any system in which they are alien to that era. I think would be really entertaining. Oh, yeah, Whispering Wisp. There should be a link down below. This the Kickstarter campaign is open. It just started like a couple days ago. Should be a link. It's very everything is very reasonably priced on this. You could do print on demand or a PDF, right? Very chill. And it's honestly looks very printer friendly as well, to be honest, which is nice. If
Yeah.
because I have some folks that are in parts of the world that it is hard to even get print on demand books printed. Yeah, it's very cool. Let me know if the link in the video description doesn't go to the right place, but it should. But yeah, I get excited about this sort of setting because you could run this. It'd be so easy to adapt this into any role playing game where it is anachronistic to it,
Yeah.
right?
100%.
Yeah.
I definitely there's actually an FAQ on the page. It's like, hey, could I maybe use this for other settings? And yeah, the answer is absolutely.
Oh, awesome.
There was a time when I was working like I said, this came from a Ravenloft campaign, and so D&D was kind of baked into the bones of this whole project, and so I went back and forth as to whether or not to make it just a setting in general
Right.
for RPGs, and I do think it could have been that, but it felt more correct to make it D&D, at least for now. But if it does well and takes off, I can see making a bunch of different variations of it or making adventures for other systems.
Yeah.
I think Monster of the Week would be a great fit, especially if you're from this place and you don't know how messed up it is.
Yeah.
Or I actually just bought Kids on Bikes, and I've been
Oh, that'd
skimming
work
through that. It would also
perfectly.
fit perfectly.
Oh, that'd be really if you play like teenagers in this world, right? That would
Yeah,
be really cool.
yeah. Or uh, one of the other ideas that I've thought about is doing Serenity Springs again, but in the 80s instead of the 50s, because that is a
Yeah.
similar kind of vibe. The idea has a lot of ways that you can
Yeah.
adapt it.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was reading this, I was thinking to myself, it'd be really entertaining for my game, which is post-apocalyptic Weird West, not even in our world. Like if the players fell through some rift and there's a bunch of weird robot cowboys show up here. Like that's no matter what type of anachronism you're playing with, I think that's just ripe for an interesting story to be told. Like, how do these
Yeah.
guns like, especially with a lack of violence, right? That would be so jarring for my game world, in which the players are constantly fending off monsters through violence. They come here and they're like, they can't shoot, like the gunshots are censored,
Yeah.
right? That would be really, really interesting. Yeah, so that's very cool. And just to reiterate a point you had made earlier, like, so the book has an adventure, right, that is designed for, I think it's like tier 1 D&D characters, but the setting itself is the other part of the book, which is easy to use for any other kind of game, honestly.
Yeah.
But the point is that they add anachronism, and I think that's really interesting, because I'm gonna rant. I'm like gushing
Go for it.
about your product here. So I think a lot of people would look at a product like this and say, well, why isn't this just in Call of Cthulhu? Well, it's like, well, the point, Call of Cthulhu is already basically this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a game already about this. And yeah, you could use this in Call of Cthulhu, but the anachronism and juxtaposition of characters from another kind of vibe being put into this realm makes them the others, which I think helps reinforce the point, right? Like the thrust of the setting. Is that, am I on the right track? Ryan?
Yeah, for sure. And so we talked a lot about horror inspiration, and because
Yeah.
that's like a pretty obvious direction to go. But um, for me, a big part of the inspiration is, like, as you said, the anachronism of combining things. Two of my all-time favorite shows are Community and Venture Brothers, and both of those shows are all about just throwing
Yep.
everything together in weird ways
Yeah.
and bouncing them off each other and seeing what happens. And, like, man, some of the jokes and the performances and the characters and the just, I don't know. There's a those shows are simultaneously so funny and yet so human, and at the same time, because they're able to combine things in such a
Mm-hmm.
weird way. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a big part of the inspiration, is being able to bring up those anachronisms.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Oh, Miko in chat, if Dimension 20 team would play this, oh yeah. I
Oh,
mean, they would crush it. I mean, I just imagine somebody like Brendan Lee Mulligan would eat this up. Like, as a setting to present as horror. Absolutely.
that'd be a dream come true.
Right, yeah,
That'd be
there's the
incredible.
dream. Every indie designer, like, please, Matt Mercer
Yeah.
or Brendan Lee Mulligan, play my game. If only. But no, this kind of thing is really ripe for really engaging storytelling by a DM that understands the history, is that enhances it.
Yeah.
Details about the 1950s immerse people, the strangeness of that time. Because reality is strange, and the 1950s were a very strange time indeed.
Hmm.
Yeah, the baby boomers hadn't taken over yet, for one. They were just babies still. They were young.
Yep.
Yeah, really interesting stuff in that regard. Oh well, you have NPCs in here, like the school bully is an NPC or something, right?
Oh yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah, and well, so that's another thing, is like, when people picture the 50s, there are certain archetypes they imagine, and I knew I needed to just head straight into several of those archetypes,
Yeah.
to, like the school bully, like you mentioned. Um, the one that comes to mind for me as well is, mild spoiler, but it's also on the page itself. There are classic Roswell gray aliens in the
Yeah.
setting, um, and that's another thing that I feel like people expect slash don't expect. Uh, and I guess I'm taking several steps here. We can talk about all these things separately,
Yeah.
but the main one of my favorite, like, archetypes that I fell into is, one of the big parts of the project as well is that I'm going to have a soundtrack for it. Another
Oh
talented
yeah.
friend of mine is making music for the project, and we were talking and writing notes about what to do for what. And for the aliens, my note to him was just theremin ass theremin, like, because everybody pictures the
Yeah.
yeah, and so he's been having fun playing with that.
That's awesome. Well, and
Yeah.
there's music. I believe you have on the page. You do. So if people if they go to the page, there is a soundtrack preview that you have
Mhm.
of some of the music, and I was listening to Perfect Town. I was like, oh yeah, just
Yep.
as soon as you start describing, before you even start describing the realm, right? Hit play, and let it start playing, and then you start rendering the world to your players, and I could just imagine the look of horror and surprise on their faces. The 1950s have such a particular sound to their music and the soundscape that yeah, you're really, whoever's doing the music, good job on that. It's very immersive.
Well, I can actually shout him out.
Oh sure, yeah.
His name is Clayton Davis. He is on YouTube as Clayton the Davis, I think. Um,
Oh
he's
cool.
done
Yeah.
he does modular synth stuff, and that's a lot of what he's doing for this project.
Awesome. I love getting music made for an RPG. It's an indulgence at times, right?
Yeah.
Because um, it isn't something necessary for the product, but it can really enhance it. And
Yeah.
just like in a good horror movie, the right soundtrack can really elevate a scene. Smudge on my camera. Can really elevate a scene. Yeah, I see exactly how opening with that track. And yeah, if anybody's
Mhm.
on the page now, scroll down, look for the perfect town link. It's, oh yeah. You
Yeah.
describe, the neighbors waving to each other, people walking the dog, the milkman driving by, just all those little details of suburbia 1950s with that music and the
Yeah.
abject horror that it would build. it,
Yeah. The soundtrack was actually a relative. I think we decided to do that only if maybe like 6 months ago or something like that. Just because, yeah, Clayton is interested in making music for games, and
yeah.
he's a good friend of mine, and he was down to do this project. That's a cool thing. Is like if you look at the team section down below,
Mhm.
uh, these are all I just have talented friends who are willing to help me out with this, and I'm very grateful for that.
Oh yeah, same. And well, that's what's like same with my endeavors. I just have friends and who are down to give it a try. And that's what I've really enjoyed about the indie community since I've started becoming part of it, is how friendly and helpful and supportive a lot of people are.
Hmm.
Because it's like all of us against Hasbro kind of thing. Like none of us can compete with Hasbro or any of that. But what we do have are these grassroots approaches. Well, like the reason that you're on this recording right now is because we both know Grant Breeze, who
Yep.
has his own YouTube channel, who I've talked to several times, and just what, through that connection, we met, and now we're talking about your game, and it's super cool. I
Yeah.
love that aspect of this.
Yeah, it's great. Can I actually share one
Oh, sure.
fun tidbit in that vein? So, like, being able to collaborate with other people who are talented in ways that I'm not has yielded some really fun results. So, on the Kickstarter's page, if you scroll down to under supporting material, you see a bunch of weird gadgets.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is the universal remote, which is the way that you get in and out of Serenity Springs. It is as I write, a vengeful little contraption that exists in every universe, and
Yeah.
it floats around zapping people into Serenity Springs. And the exists in every universe part is the reason you see so many different versions of it. But what's really fun is when I was working with the artist Spaghetti on this,
Hmm.
they saw my descriptions, which basically said like, yeah, there's a generic normal 50s one, there's like maybe a steampunk one, and they just took that and ran with it. And I a while ago they sent me the pictures, and I immediately laughed my ass off because they had made the one that's just the rock with with the
Yeah.
teeth attached to it. Like,
It's so good. So
it's
the
great.
detail, the wooden one, and how the screws are the different heads to look like plus and minus.
Yeah.
What a detail. I
Yeah.
love it. It's so
Yeah. And
funny.
yeah, and it's great. And like those were not my ideas. I had the prompt and I
Yeah,
passed it off to them and they came up with it, and it adds so much more textures to it, and it's great. And
I
like
love that.
it's just it's just some of the main joys of passing your vision to people and seeing what they come up with it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, hey, Open World Addict. I just saw you were in chat. Hey, just say they said hi. But yeah, when you start collaborating with others, they add to your world as well, right? They set precedences with their art that sometimes move how you build the world, and it's really a pleasure to do. Um,
Hmm.
And something I wanted to, just because as I was scrolling down, I noticed you have the no AI art. So this is something that which is great, human made. And despite that, look at how cool this art is, right? And this art was all made on a budget. It's something I keep preaching. It's like, use what's out there. There's so much free stuff.
Yep.
And it's a skill to put it together as well as your layout person did, of course. But like, this is awesome. And you didn't have to feed it into an algorithm.
Yeah.
You just kit bash all this free stuff that's out there, and it immediately gives you all the vibe you need, right? This is like, that's a perfect art direction choice, right?
Yeah.
And this was on indie designers work on very tight budgets. So, but you don't need to spend a lot of money, nor do you actually need to have it be generative AI images, which turns everybody off from the product.
Yeah.
Oh, wrong on porpoise. Yeah, we love a little collaborative world building. Yeah, it's a privilege and a pleasure when you do get a little money to start working with artists to have them influence the vision of the world, and that actually shapes the world. As an example, for a while, I was having trouble coming up with a visual of how the clockwork people in my game looked, because I'm not an artist. I'm not a very visual
Mm.
person. Until one of my main artists just came up with a cool idea, and now that's what I just sent to all the other artists. Say like, use this as your
Yep.
baseline, and that shapes how I view my own world that I created, and that's super cool. Uh,
Yeah.
I'd love to make a game where I start with the art and have an artist like just build a bunch of stuff, and then I make a game based on that. I think that'd be a really fun reversal. Like, have them build a world and characters and what they're doing in scenes, and then I have to replicate that. I think that'd be a
Yeah.
really fun process. Anyway, that's a tangent,
Well,
but
I've actually had exactly that thought several times
yeah.
when I've like been looking for stock art for a project to buy, and I've had that thought multiple times, like, oh man, I love all of these pieces of art this guy has made. Maybe I could make a monster out of that and make it into
I
my own
Oh,
thing. It's just
100%.
like,
Yeah, monster
yeah,
design is definitely like that. Well, and that's probably what's interesting about Serenity Springs is monster design isn't the thrust of this adventure, from what I understand, because it's not about violence as much. Yeah, you're going to get
yeah,
into fights because there's G-men and there's Greys and there's antagonists, but the real threat is a little bit more existential, or a little bit more abstract in that way, which is also why D&D players may feel ill-equipped at first. That's why they'll be so fish
yeah,
out of water. They're like, we can't just fireball our way out of this problem, right? As so many are wont to do.
yeah.
Uh,
Well,
yeah.
and that is definitely a thing. Is like, as I'm sure has been discussed endlessly on the internet, D&D is not
Mhm.
necessarily the best game for horror, but at the same time, it's the most popular thing, and so you kind of have to wrestle with it to a certain degree. And one of the things that I've found really successful for doing horror in D&D is breaking the rules, essentially.
Agreed.
So that is why I have the haze operating the way it does. Is because you always know how much damage you're taking in D&D.
Yeah.
That and that's
It's
but to me,
yeah.
yeah, it was an easy rule to break and just be like, no, you don't. Boom. It's scary and unknown because I took this element that you're very used to and got rid of it.
Yeah.
Um, and
I
and I
love that.
think I think that kind of design approach is much better for generating horror within that system than just making a stat block that's scarier.
Yeah, because it does a lot of damage or something, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
with
Like at
you.
a certain point, that doesn't mean anything, or it doesn't mean anything in terms of the scare. You really have to kind of go outside the box.
No, I agree and appreciate that perspective a lot, because I've also run a lot of horror in D&D over the years, but to do so, I had to break things, and that's
Hmm.
okay, right? That's what we're here to do. That's what game design is. You don't have to color within the lines, and it's why when I was thinking about your project and the decision to make it built on D&D, why I think it's actually a good use of D&D. It's because of this juxtaposition. You If the players already are in a system that assumes all of this horror or elements, the fish out of water aspect wouldn't land as much. right? You're undermining their assumptions here, which is a fun way to do it. And those are riskier plays, right? That you don't see in as many like standard adventures, right? Like that's why I like it.
Yeah.
Boy, just what a rug pull for the players in the best way, right? And now
Yeah.
here's the new challenge: go this session without cursing. Good luck, some of my friends.
Yeah. Oh,
uh,
okay.
right?
I do have to. So, I like I said, I ran this as part of a campaign a while ago, and I was gearing up for Serenity Springs, and I had the swear jar in the back of my head, and I was like, I wonder how long it'll take my players to activate the swear jar.
Was it fast?
I thought immediate,
Yep.
because so they had just gone to town, they had gotten some new fancy clothes or something, and one of my characters had gotten like a green cloak that he was emphasizing how cool the green cloak was.
Yeah.
And they show up in this world that's all black and white.
Yeah.
I don't know if we mentioned that detail yet. The whole world is in black and white at all times.
Yeah.
Um, and I described that to him, and he swears loudly about it, and I just laugh my ass off immediately
Yeah.
because he got by the swear jar right off the bat. And
Perfect timing. You couldn't have
great.
written better timing, right? If you had planned it. And yeah, the swear jar like floats over, better put a coin
Yeah.
in. And they don't have any quarters yet because
No,
they just
they don't.
arrived.
And suddenly you have these like powerful 13th level paladins searching through couch cushions
Yeah,
for
like, oh, I
quarters.
gotta find some quarters because I know I won't be able to keep my impulse control like
Yeah.
under wraps. Yeah, I can totally imagine the missus, my wife, like playing this and accidentally cursing immediately. And she will curse like a sailor, and
Yep.
especially being plopped into 1950s America like this. Just boy, that would be a sight.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. That's using, like I said, that's using mechanics to enforce a theme, right? It's very evocative, and like we were talking about, it needles the player just a little bit, right? They lose
Yeah.
a little bit of max HP, it's just a little bit, but the nickel and diming, kind of quite literally, of them will be scary, right? They'll
Yeah.
be gun shy about that. And one of the hardest things in game design when you're trying to evoke very particular settings is finding punchy mechanics to articulate that, right? So that's
Yeah.
why I think the swear jar is an example of very simple mechanic, right? There's not even any dice involved, but it's really punchy.
Hmm.
The players will immediately feel like they are being censored, which they should, right?
Yep.
And it was smart because rather than saying you can't swear, right? Which is way less, if, for example, the world changed anytime they swear into a non profane word, that's not interactive, right?
Hmm.
You don't get the players going like, accidentally after they say something and then feeling guilty as the swear jar flies over, right? It's giving players choice and interaction points that enhance their immersion, which is good
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. And that's something that I try to do with my RPG design in general is like, I'm running the game. I usually have a vague idea of where I want things to go and how I want things to feel and all that stuff. But I try to avoid forcing people into the thing that I want directly. But yeah, I'll put in all kinds of random bullshit to like suggest,
Yeah, yeah,
because I feel like that's just a much more interesting experience. And sometimes they'll break it in ways that I didn't expect, and that too is cool. So
yeah, absolutely. Players tend to push on the boundaries all the time. It's just, what they do. They want to
yep.
push against the edges of it. But they are in a realm in which conformity is enforced, and so as they push against it, they'll be met with harsh resistance in all
Hmm.
likelihood. There's like Men in Black kind of like feds and stuff, right? There's the G-men. There's antagonistic forces at work here enforcing this homogeny, and I could see how it would be a satisfying arc to finally like defeat. I'm trying not to spoil the adventure, having now investigated a lot of it, but I could see that being a more satisfying than taking down a dragon.
Yeah.
Right? Is getting to the bottom of this awful, awful place and defeating what is causing it. Right? Like
Yeah.
there'd be something very satisfying with that. I can see already. Yeah, it makes me really want to run this like using my rule system, especially just because it's just as anachronistic to take people from the 1890s, I think, as it would be from a fantasy realm, like an apocalyptic clockwork eldritch horror world, and put them in the
Hmm.
1950s. They will immediately get their guns out and be like,
Yeah.
there's something going on here. I don't like this. And just how that anachronism would be a lot of fun. Yeah, it's really cool. Just let me just catch up on chat here really fast. Oh, Tales from the Loop is exactly that art first idea. Oh, is it? I didn't know Tales from the
Hmm.
Loop started with art in that way. I know that it is rarely like an art forward product, but a lot of Tales from the Loop is the same folks that do the same folks that did the Bastionland series of games. Or now I'm getting them confused.
I'm not sure.
Right? Maybe somebody in chat can correct me. Um, the the sorry, my watch is telling me somebody's calling me. I'll have to call them back. The idea that you take this evocative art and then build a game from that is very cool. I know games like Mythic Bastionland are very art forward in that most of the book is art, and the art is supposed to immerse you um, in it. But I don't know if it was an art first game. The breaking the known. Oh, yeah. Whispering Wisp says, yeah, you're breaking the known to create the unknown. Well, yeah, so much of to talk about adventure design a little bit, especially when you're playing with veteran RPG players and you're doing something like D&D. I'm the new guy in my D&D group, and I've been playing for 26 years. So, like, I'm the newbie still.
Yeah.
So when you're playing in a crowd like that and you send them into a dungeon, they know every monster. They've been through every trap, right? They've seen it all in every edition of the game. But when you send them to 1950s America and don't tell them how much damage they took, they've probably not done that before.
Yeah.
Right? You have to, I gotta break apart those assumptions, especially with experienced players, to give them really something new and novel.
Yep. Yeah. I feel like I need to potentially try to challenge myself in the future to make something more in line with the standard stuff, because I really enjoy making these weird anachronistic things. My first adventure actually came out a couple of years ago. It's called No Time for the Wicked, and it is explicitly a Ravenloft adventure for the Seer 1313 Lightning Rail. Um, anyway, it too is anachronistic because players are stuck in a time loop, and the way out is not obvious, and they have to figure out how to get out of it. And you can't necessarily stab your way through the problem.
Right.
Yeah, and that was the first adventure I made, was a friggin' time loop.
Yeah. No, I love that kind of stuff. That's what draws me to. I don't run a lot of D&D these days, but when I do, I like make it as weird as I can, or I need to break
Yeah.
it apart. Because again, like liking horror, the thing that I always did is if I'm going to start a horror campaign or one that I want to emphasize more gritty and horror, there's no spellcasters or healing magic. And that like a lot of people are like, how can you play D&D like that? I'm like, turns easily.
Hmm.
Honestly, it's not that hard. Yeah, there's other systems, sure, that are for gritty low fantasy campaigns, but taking D&D players and putting them into an unconventional situation using a rule system they're familiar with, keep banging my mic with my watch, putting them into that situation can create really unique experiences because it's in the familiar, right?
Yeah.
You're taking familiar and plopping it into the unfamiliar. And there's a lot of value to those experiences. I think they're very cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for those that may have come in a little later, just a reminder, we are talking about Serenity Springs, which is a setting and adventure. It's on Kickstarter right now. There's a link in the description. Just realize we've been waxing for a little bit. It's very cool. It is 1950s nostalgia, surreal nostalgia horror is maybe a phrase I can use for that. Definitely check it out. Very cool project. It is built for D&D, but much of it, like, I'd probably guess 70% of this would be easily usable in any other game without doing any editing. Just take the
Yeah.
setting and the world and the NPCs and the plot line that's underneath and use it for anything at all very easily. So that's what we are talking about here. And definitely listen to the
Yeah.
music that's been prepped on down the soundtrack section. It is incredible.
One other thing I wanted to mention about it, like using it for other systems. I'm still kind of working on the encounter table section
Mm,
of it, and very much want the encounter table bit to not be system dependent, to be much more lore dependent than anything.
right.
So the encounter tables aren't going to have like, 1d4 aliens or something like that. The encounter table is like, you see a group of people playing baseball and they invite you to play, and you have no idea what baseball is.
Yeah,
It's
baseball. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So like I said, it's system, it's lore dependent, not system dependent.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're not going to like as you travel through Serenity Springs, you're not going to roll 1d6 wolves that you're going to slaughter or something. That's not the kind of
Yeah,
encounters you're going to have because the social pressure of this world is what needs to be maintained. So yeah, the
yeah,
youths invite you to play a game with them. Turning them down isn't very neighborly of you. Right?
yeah,
It's like that kind of vibe. Doing things that are like getting yourself into a socially unacceptable situation would be an encounter. Again, you can't fireball your way out of that,
yeah.
and that's
Uh,
presents
and,
a really interesting challenge. Yeah.
and even more, and something even more in that vein is one of the encounters is the bully drives by in his car and throws a milkshake at you and shouts "nerd."
Shouts nerd. That's
Yeah,
that is great. I mean, yeah, what do you do,
like,
right? When
yeah,
your violence doesn't really work either. Like violence isn't working as you expect here, right? Like what are you going to do about that?
yeah. And that's the thing. I think that's one of the things that Serenity Springs does really well is the "what are you gonna do" question is perpetually really interesting and hard to answer.
Yeah, it's less straightforward than here's the next room in the dungeon. We open the door. If anything's in it, we kill there. We kill what's in the room. That's what you generally
Yeah.
do. Move from room to room and fight the monsters contained therein. And yeah, that opportunity to do unconventional things also helps highlight various character builds in games like D&D that don't always get the spotlight. Your illusionists, your enchanters, like as far as magic, rogues who or bards that have a lot of social skills start to be much more relevant. That
Hmm.
disguise kit really helpful if you need to blend in now, right?
Yep.
Just like they do in Star Trek where they put a beanie on Spock, right, so that you don't know he's a Vulcan. You need to
Yep.
start doing that sort of thing. Somebody whispering whispers, "Come on, McFly!" Yeah, you get
Yeah.
Biff. You get your Biff
Yeah.
in there. Exactly.
Exactly. And like that's the thing is like when you're running just D&D, you have to pull on a completely different set of references and ideas that are, still great and still very useful, but like just being able to run D&D where you can pull on, yeah, Back to the Future for your
Yeah,
references, like that's, I think, really fun, weird stuff comes out of that.
absolutely. Well, and for a lot of people, because so much media is made around that, featuring that time period, right, from in Hollywood, a lot of people, especially Americans, are going to have a lot of cultural touch points already. Like they will be
Hmm.
pretty darn familiar. Uh, and I know you were saying, I think it's in the book itself. There's going to be a huge list of media references as well. I think it was mentioned. So for those that aren't
Yeah.
as familiar, you kind of have a reading list for sure. Oh, Ugly Goblin has an interesting comment. So he's working on his own game as well. Trying to wrap my head around the stat blocks for creatures when they aren't just here's the violent aspect of the creature, right? Is an interesting challenge. Like creating stat blocks that are more interactive than that. And there's not a silver bullet there, Gabriel, but something to think about. Here's the advice I'll give: write a monster that can't be killed. Make literally just write the line "cannot die" and try to design around that. What do you do now?
Yep.
Right? Like if you start with that, it's an interesting thought experiment of killing it doesn't work. How would you create a win condition now? And that start in your system. Uh, this gets in, and then you could also say the similar thing. This monster does no damage to the players. How does it threaten them? Think about that, right? You start with these like binary thoughts, and then work from there. Anyway, that's my recommendation to break out of the mold of. I feel like D&D stat blocks historically are a set of defenses and attacks, and they generally just deal damage generally. in various forms. And so breaking out of that can be a little challenging for sure. But that's the thought
Yeah.
experiment I do. I have some monsters in my game that you can't kill. You can't kill it. You have to lift the curse or something. That's how you defeat it. You can
Yeah.
shoot it with your holy bullets, but it just comes right back. Yeah.
I made a monster just like that in this Ravenloft campaign, not in Serenity
Yeah.
Springs,
Yeah.
but the monster was not killable. It would if you were it basically was just always walking towards you, and if you were within its aura, it would just sap your energy.
Oh, very It
And
Follows.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it never I didn't give it a single attack. It just kept getting closer to you and sapping your energy,
I love that.
and it couldn't die. And I think I also gave it two reactions, just again breaking the rules.
Yeah.
Um,
Break
yeah,
them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, indie designers don't need to play it as safe because you don't have like stockholders,
yeah,
right? You can make these kind of bolder decisions in design, for sure. And that's what we see here in Serenity Springs is breaking up assumptions about D&D campaigns and D&D rules. Yeah, the snail whispering wisp, exactly like that thought experiment. Like if the
yeah,
snail
yeah,
ever
yeah.
touches you, you die. Uh,
Yep.
for sure. Um, Oh yeah, so Ugly Goblin, it's tricky too, right? Because you don't want too many mechanics for roleplay social scenarios either that take away from the narrative or slow it down. Like how would you make a stat block for a lawyer? Well, yeah, it's that is a big subject, right? That we do not have time to dig into right now, my friend. But the idea of how a system mechanicizes non-violent conflict is a very interesting subject that
Yeah.
maybe a separate video on at a later date. But yeah, that's really tough. If your game engine is built purely on violence, it's not giving you necessarily the tools you need to design threats that aren't violent, right? If the whole game is built around violence, I mean that's what the engine is. Something to consider. Um,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
and games in general, not just TTRPGs, but I would argue that games in general are also video games and board games are kind of built around violence as like the core interaction of it, right?
Mhm.
We're, as a species, we're incredibly good at mechanicizing violence,
Yeah.
but mechanicizing social interaction is a lot more complicated. I've seen games that like try to mechanicize
Yeah.
social interactions, and it ends up feeling like, well, this is just a different kind of health bar. Like, that's
Yeah.
how in depth the violence element is
Yeah,
with game
you'll
design.
get those, yeah, social fights. Basically, they're encounters nonetheless, and they're basically a fight, a social fight with some sort of HP bar. And there's some people that really love that level of mechanicizing. I have
I broke it for
every
both of
time
us.
I say it different. And some people who would rather there be no stat block you need to run the lawyer threat. It's all conversation. There's a huge amount of different variety of disciplines that go into that, for sure. But yeah, Ugly Goblin. Maybe we could talk another time on that. That'd be a fun video to do. We could talk on how to build a stat block that isn't just a set of death. Like here's how it dies and how it tries to kill you. That'd be an interesting
Mhm.
separate subject. But we're at about the hour mark here, so we'll wrap it up. But really fun talking to you, Ryan. Really glad that we connected because this kind of thing is my jam. There is a link down below. Again, this is on Kickstarter right now. The campaign just launched within the last few days, and it's a small scope project. Right, the game is built. Like the adventure is ready. This isn't like we're gonna wait 2 years, like and a bunch of delays or anything. Really cool stuff. Definitely check it out in the link below. Yeah, such a cool premise. Really unique, and that's what I love about the indie space is that we get unique offerings, right? Things you're not going to see anywhere else. So definitely
Yeah.
check out the link below. And then Ryan, any other plugs or things we should check out apart from this page, or is the page the good jumping off point to all the
Uh,
things for it?
yeah, the page is a good jumping off point if you want to follow more of what I'm doing in the future and that kind of stuff. Check out Grinning Portal Games on Blue Sky. I also have the website grinningportalgames.com. Those are my main channels for future updates. And yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's been really fun to hang out and chat about this strange dorky thing that,
Yeah,
that I've
yeah.
made.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And thanks everybody who was watching and chatting along on this Saturday. Well, some of you Saturday morning, some of you Saturday night. I know some of you across the pond. So yeah, thanks everybody. This was a lot of fun. And as always, check out the links below for my stuff, for Ryan's stuff. And yeah, thanks everybody. Hope you have a good rest of your day.
Bye.